Before the Roman destruction, the oral tradition was a centralized, living dialogue. Scholars in Judean study halls engaged in a rigorous pedagogical transmission, passing a synchronized legal code from master to student through face-to-face debate. Following the destruction of the Second Temple, the Roman Empire executed a total dismantling of Judean infrastructure. This Judea Capta coin broadcasted imperial dominance, specifically marking the crushing revolt at Beitar. Rome issued decrees to systematically dismantle the Jewish judiciary. They banned the ordination of new judges and targeted the scholars of the Supreme Court for execution, aiming to paralyze the legal system at its head. These targeted executions severed the pedagogical chain. For over 1,000 years, the law relied on the direct apprenticeship of student to master. Now, that line of transmission was broken. Surviving students were forced into isolation without the experiential guidance of their masters. They had to independently apply the 13 complex hermeneutical principles to resolve new legal cases, working from fragmented knowledge. To prevent the total loss of the law, scholars began recording their memories in private manuscripts. These were unedited, localized notes intended only as personal safeguards against forgetting the oral tradition. This geographical and pedagogical isolation created a clear danger. As each academy relied on its own isolated records, the single national tradition began splintering into hundreds of irreconcilable versions of the law. Rabbi Judah the Prince, known as Rebbe, emerged during a brief, unusual era of peace. He navigated a temporary cessation of hostility between the Roman Empire and the Jewish people. Rebbe occupied a unique position of high socioeconomic status and maintained a respected relationship with the Roman emperor. This status provided a stable environment to address the legal crisis. Rebbe anticipated that this era of peace was a fleeting opportunity. He recognized that future persecutions would likely destroy the fragmented records if the law remained decentralized. He launched a nationwide project to gather every scattered note and private study manuscript from the remaining academies, consolidating the surviving fragments of the oral law. The collected materials revealed a massive inconsistency. Every teacher used distinct linguistic formulations and different teaching styles. Without a common language, the academies could not communicate a unified legal standard. Rebbe's objective was to forge a single official text, the Mishnah. This would serve as a precise, universal curriculum for every future court in the land. This was a constitutional intervention. By unifying the law into a single curriculum, Rebbe aimed to fix the legal system's trajectory before it fractured beyond repair. The editorial process involved filtering the gathered notes and cross-referencing regional variations back to their original pedagogical origins to ensure accuracy. Rebbe used the teachings of Rabbi Meir as the structural baseline. Rabbi Meir was known for concise, precise formulations that were easier for students to memorize and recite. Transitioning to an official written text was a radical shift for a system that had been strictly oral for over a millennium. The Mishnah contains a specific architectural anomaly. Rebbe did not limit the text to the final, accepted rulings of the majority. He systematically codified the outvoted minority opinions directly alongside the binding laws. This decision seems counterintuitive. If the goal was to eliminate legal confusion and unify a fractured system, recording the very disputes he intended to resolve appears to invite new questions. The binding law is presented in gold. Beside it, the rejected law is rendered in silver, logged into the same boundary. This prevents legal regression. If a future court attempts to validate a discarded tradition, the codified minority text identifies it as a rejected argument. Preserving the minority voice provided a safeguard. It ensured that future courts would not inadvertently adopt an opinion that the central authority had already debated and outvoted. The danger was that a future generation might discover a forgotten, isolated tradition and mistake it for a newly revealed authentic law. By including the minority opinion in the official text, Rebbe ensured this threat would be neutralized the moment a judge referenced the Mishnah. Future Supreme Courts now had a procedural tool to prove a proposed tradition had already been considered and officially rejected by the previous generations. The Mishnah records the reasoning behind these disputes, demonstrating to later scholars that both sides were thoroughly understood before the majority vote was cast. This documentation extended to even the most isolated scholars, ensuring their dissenting voices remained part of the official record alongside the consensus. This mechanism effectively fixed the legal record, creating a permanent boundary that prevented the law from being accidentally rolled back to an earlier state of conflict. This structure ensured the survival of legal clarity, despite the Roman attempts to destroy the scholar class. By encoding its own rejected alternatives, the Mishnah protected the Jewish legal system against internal fragmentation. The compilation of the text does not explain its success. Why did a globally scattered nation agree to follow this specific document? The Mishnah's authority did not come from Rebbe's personal fortune or his status within the Roman administration. In this legal system, socioeconomic power has no capacity to dictate binding law. A leader cannot unilaterally impose a legal code based on status alone. Roman law relied on top-down imperial force. As shown here on the Arch of Titus, the empire's authority was established through military conquest and a physical subjugation of the population. Rebbe's approach was different. He distributed the Mishnah to the surviving academies, making the text available for exhaustive review by every living scholar. The scholars reviewed the text and recognized that it accurately reflected their traditions and lineages. Its internal logic and comprehensive scope earned their professional respect. This widespread recognition of the text's accuracy prepared the way for the only mechanism that could make it binding, the consent of the people. Within Jewish jurisprudence, objective law becomes binding only when it achieves formal, mutual consent from the nation. The scholars and the people formally accepted the Mishnah as their definitive legal code, a move that elevated the text from a scholarly work to binding law. This consensus occurred on a massive scale, with academies in Egypt, Babylon, and Judea simultaneously adopting the text as their official curriculum. This national ratification restored the unified legal platform that the Roman decrees had attempted to dismantle. This process of adoption mirrors the mechanics of the original Sinai covenant, where the nation's acceptance was the prerequisite for the law's validity. Just as the written Torah required the active consent of the nation at Sinai, the codification of the oral Torah required this same national ratification to become objective law. This single agreed-upon document ensured the cohesion of the Jewish legal tradition through 2,000 years of global exile. The authority of the Mishnah demonstrates that the tradition is sustained not through force, but through the continuous, rational consent of the community it governs.